Unexpectedly, discovering 4 children, a millionaire. Cowboy's incredible journey transforms lives. The hot Texas sun beat down relentlessly as Jake Matthews stepped into the barn, thick layers of dust swirling around him. Memories whispered through the faded wood. Laughter, warmth, love, remnants of a life shared with Linda. Now those echoes felt like ghosts intruding on his solitude. As he scanned the barn, something unfamiliar caught his eye. A trunk, neglected and hidden beneath years of debris. Intrigued, he approached, each step heavy with a sense of trepidation that twisted at his gut. What could be within that would disturb his lonely routine? Jake knelt and pried open the rusty latch, dust clouds swirling onto his weathered hands. Inside were stacks of yellowing letters, tied together with a frayed string. A flicker of unease crept up his spine as he untangled them, the compelling word father leaping out from the pages. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. He had 4 children, each one born from a past he barely recognized. With every letter opened, the identities of their lives began to unfold, contrasting fiercely with the desolate ranch he had clung to since Linda was gone. A painter struggling for validation in the city, a polished attorney navigating boardrooms, a single mother battling uncertainty, and a timid college girl, each letter tugging at Jake's heart, unraveling threads of regret. Why had he never reached out? Guilt tore through him, each sentence binding him in chains of what if. Could he have stepped in, made it right? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The psychological weight pressed heavier as he contemplated each child. Their struggles somehow mirrored his own, but they were also different, carved by life choices he had never influenced. His life had been one of sweat and toil, but their paths seemed littered with obstacles he didn't understand. What if he wasn't enough for them? What if his arrival in their lives disrupted the fragile constructs they had built? Unraveling years of solitary living had left him uncertain, battling a torrent of insecurities as he wrestled with images of these strangers, his flesh and blood. The prospect of meeting them sent a shiver of anticipation mingled with dread coursing through him, a storm raging with each revelation. As he stood surrounded by shadows of the past, Jake felt the ground beneath his boots shift. His own identity, once anchored as a rugged rancher, now wobbled with the pulse of newfound responsibility. Faces emerged, lost time swirling like dust, each child a reminder of what he could not escape. Jake braced himself, the fading sunlight casting ominous shadows in the corners of the barn. Alone, with memories swirling around him like a raging tempest, he was at a precipice, forced to reckon not just with the children he had deservedly lost, but with the father he might still become. Would they see him as a man marked by flaws, or could there still be room for forgiveness? As dusk descended over the Texas plains, Jake wrestled with choices that could shatter or mend the fragile bond. The road ahead was murky, and his heart raced knowing that the confrontation loomed dangerously close. How to bridge the gap of a lifetime could either redeem or destroy him. The weight of countless unanswered questions hung thick in the air as Jake wrestled with the letters lying open before him. Each word felt like a brick, adding to a wall he had been constructing for too many years, a barrier against confronting his failures. He could no longer pretend that his past choices had no consequence. Now, they lived in the tangible form of 4 people he had abandoned long ago. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, struggling to sift through the cacophony of emotions. Guilt wrestled with a gnawing sense of inadequacy. He had spent so long living in isolation, trying to carve a stoic existence out of hardened earth. But now he recognized that his efforts only masked the deeper afflictions festering inside him. The hard labor of ranching had dulled his senses. It was easier to bury the past beneath plowed soil than to face the haunting truth of his own failures. With each letter, a different child's need emerged, yet there was a shared yearning underneath. They all desired connection, acceptance, the guidance of a father who had chosen silence over presence. A pang of longing twisted in his chest as he thought of what he had robbed them of. Could a simple visit suffice to fill the hollow spaces in their lives, or would it only serve to highlight the void he had left? Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into a role he was wholly unprepared for. His hands trembled as he flipped through another letter, this one from the single mother. The words swirled together, and he felt a visceral response to her struggle, fighting day in and day out to provide for her child alone. In contrast, Jake had to confront his own selfishness. He had lived in emotional exile while his children faced the world without him. It was a sobering realization. "What was I thinking?" he muttered under his breath, grappling with the unsettling truth. Determined not to wallow in regret, Jake scraped together his resolve. They were not just reflections of what he had lost, they were distinct individuals with the right to reach out, to know their past, and to carve out a future that included him. He couldn't simply step out of the shadows when it was convenient. This was a commitment that would require sustained effort, emotional labor, and perhaps a healing of his own wounds. Jake's heart thundered as he considered picking up the phone and calling the first child on the list. The painter, perhaps their shared struggle for authenticity could foster a connection. But what if he stumbled over his words? What if he failed them a second time? The specter of another rejection loomed like a thunderhead, threatening to drown his budding determination in fear. Yet, with that fear came clarity. To truly grow meant moving beyond that fear. He would embrace vulnerability. Only then could he be the father they had yearned for. A resolve washed over him, a commitment to face not just his children, but also the mirror reflecting the man he had become. The decision forced a wave of energy through him, invigorating a resolve that had long diminished. As he positioned himself in front of the trunk, an awkward smile crept onto his face. The first phase of this journey was clear. He would reach out individually, without pretense, craving their forgiveness while extending his own, creating space for healing. But just as he reached for the phone, a jarring thought flickered through his mind. What if one of them rejected him outright? The storm of uncertainty returned, battering the resolve he had just built like a fragile house of cards. In that moment of hesitation, he plummeted back into doubt. But the impending confrontation called to him, echoing promises of redemption. He had to step into that fear and commit to this path, for the sake of both father and children. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself against the storm of emotions that were sure to come, as he grasped the phone tightly. The time had come to face the children he had long left behind, and with each dial, a chance for rebirth or ruin. Would they welcome him back, or would his chance for reconciliation slip further away? Jake's finger hovered over the phone's dial pad, the cool touch of plastic sending a shiver of apprehension through his arm. The letters lay scattered, a haphazard crowd pressing into his thoughts like an unrelenting tide. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to silence the doubts that twirled like insistent sparrows in his mind. This call, for all he feared, marked the first genuine step toward accepting the consequences of his past. It wasn't merely a connection, it was the genesis of a new chapter. To traverse the trepidation residing in his gut felt necessary, almost revolutionary. Would they even want to hear from him? Yet the more he asked himself that question, the clearer it became. It didn't matter what they wanted. What mattered was that he reached out, even if it meant being met with hostility. The chaos of his internal landscape morphed into determined clarity as he envisioned the young woman whose form had once sparked his life with laughter. This was a painting yet to be completed, a canvas filled with vibrant chaos waiting to be explored. He took a deep breath, envisioning the painter. A flicker of artistic awe ignited within him as he recalled the letters that spoke of her struggles and dreams. No longer could he permit the hesitation to paralyze him. With a steadying inhale, he pressed the first number. A single heartbeat felt like eternity as the dial tone echoed in his ear. Nervous energy crackled underneath his skin, but the moment stood to define him. When the ringing ceased and a voice answered, Jake's heart thundered, tethered to hope. "Hello? Marissa?" His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "It's Jake, your father." Silence enveloped him. A myriad of emotions played against the backdrop of the line, confusion, disbelief. "Why are you calling? What do you want?" Jake winced. Each word felt like another invitation to sink back into despair, but he couldn't afford to retreat. I know I've been absent. I owe you an explanation, and I want to be a part of your life now, if you'll let me." As she processed his words, uncertainty lingered in the air. Jake could feel her hesitance like a thick fog wrapping around him, mingled with fragile curiosity. He realized that they were both suspended at the edge of something monumental. If Marissa wanted to give in to curiosity, to explore the possibility of forgiveness, he would have to brace himself for any reaction, good or bad. "I don't know if I'm ready to talk to you," she finally responded, the vulnerability evident in her tone. Jake's heart sank, but he pressed on. "I understand. I know I've lost the right to ask anything, but I truly want to change things, to be present, to help you in any way I can." The line went still again, and Jake could almost feel the walls shifting within her. What existed now was not merely reparation, it was an awakening, something they both had to confront bravely. He was scared but resolved, determined to peel away the layers of silence that had defined their shared history. "I can't promise anything," she said, her words laced with uncertainty. "Just give me a chance to prove that I'm worth it. Start with coffee or a walk. Wherever you feel comfortable, I'll show you I'm not the same man from before." The corners of hope shifted within her reply. "Maybe I'll think about it." Her tentative acceptance felt like the delicate brush of a new beginning, but Jake knew better than to get lost in unguarded hopes. As they ended the call, he basked in the cautious epiphany that was taking shape. This was just the start, a fragile bridge built on the willingness to confront the past. Drawing a deep breath, he looked out into the vast expanse of his ranch, a land marked by both prosperity and shadows. With a resolute heart, he knew he would have to face the others next, the musician, the athlete, the artist's sibling. This was merely the first step into a landscape of healing. How they chose to engage with him remained uncertain, but Jake felt something in him shift, an unlocking he had sought for far too long. Would they mirror Marissa's tentative hope, or would they mirror the rejections he feared? The questions loomed, their weight heavy in his chest. In the depths of uncertainty, the promise of another call lay waiting, another threshold to cross. And with it blossomed a question that threatened to unravel everything he had just started to build. Could he navigate the rocky terrain of redemption and discover not just a father's love, but the rekindling of a family lost? Jake leaned back in his chair, the sun spilling through the window and casting flickers of light across his desk. The comfortable familiarity of the ranch surrounded him, but an uneasy presence tugged at his mind. Marissa's hesitant reply echoed persistently in his ears. Perhaps he had imagined moving forward so effortlessly. He had pivoted away from past mistakes, from an identity forged in neglect. Yet now, each pending call loomed larger. He clenched his fists, battling the fear that held him at bay. He had been successful in life, running a thriving ranch, yet personal reconciliation felt more daunting than any business deal he had ever executed. This was a negotiation of the heart, and logic had little place in such fragile negotiations. When the phone rang again, his heart momentarily lifted, but it was a neighbor checking in about the livestock. Jake spoke amiably about the ranch, yet his thoughts were hundreds of miles away, focused on a gnawing question. Could he manage the next call? Could he confront the past without crumbling? As he arranged his workspace, a small crack in his armor began to grow. He recalled the vibrant letters from the other children. This was not just about Marissa. They too had been entangled in the tangles of his choices. The muscular shadow of neglect loomed large over each forgotten birthday, each missed moment that had draped a dark veil over their lives. Anguish crashed against determination as Jake absorbed the reality. His actions could no longer exist in isolation. The thought propelled him into motion. He couldn't sit idle any longer, retreating into discomfort. Stealing glances at the clock, he felt the flicker of time moving toward a meeting he had formerly dreaded. Gripping the receiver, he prepared himself mentally for an unraveling of sorts, a tapestry of familial connection woven from frayed and fading threads. Dialing the number of his second child, the musician Jonathan, Jake steadied himself. Each ring felt like a ticking clock. The weight of unspoken truths hung heavily as he anticipated Jonathan's voice. What would the boy say? Would he be met with resentment? Or worse, indifference? Self-doubt tightened around him, but the resolve to face penance pulsed through his veins. "Hello," Jonathan answered, his tone flat and cautious. "Hey, it's Jake," he said, the facade of confidence crumbling slightly. "Your father." Silence blanketed the line. Jake willed himself to hold on, anxiety twisting in his gut. Would this silence lead to rejection? I wanted to reach out. I realize I missed your graduation, and I regret it so deeply. You think an apology can fix a decade of being absent? Jonathan shot back, the raw edge of pain lacing his words. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it again. He could sense the algorithm of doubt feeding into Jonathan's mistrust of him. No, I know it can't. I simply want you to know I want to be present in your life now. I'm trying to do better. Jonathan scoffed. That's rich. You can't just drop in and expect we'll all forget. A mixture of anger and hurt rose within Jake, but he swallowed hard. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance. I want to be there, even if it's just as someone you can vent your frustrations on. A pause followed, filled with the clinking of something being set down. It felt like the ball was in his son's court now, the tension palpable. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, Jonathan finally replied, his voice softened by uncertainty. I guess I never really wanted to talk to you. Then let's just... Jake hesitated, searching for a path through the darkness. Let's just talk about the music. I'd love to hear what you've been working on. Something inside him shifted as he said it, like the faintest glimmer of daylight at the end of a long tunnel. I'll listen and learn. Forgiveness doesn't have to be the price of entry. I just want to know you. What do you think? This is some kind of therapy session? Jonathan retorted, though it lacked the sharp bite of his earlier tone. No, he replied, the guilt now burning fiercely in his gut. It's just me trying to understand, and let you define the terms. The line stayed silent again, but Jake could feel the tenuous thread of connection gradually weaving. The struggle hung between them. Could he truly rebuild something from the ashes? He hung up, still rattled, but intoxicated by the fragile hope that had begun to bloom within him. Perhaps it wasn't about fixing everything at once. Each call could carve away at the wall between them, and from that, maybe, just maybe, something stronger could grow. As he processed all he had gleaned, another name entered his mind. Amelia, the artist whose soul had once resonated in his own. He pondered the challenge ahead. The clock of redemption had begun its ticking routine. He could feel time racing against him, driving him to understand something deeper. Could he navigate the tumultuous waters of regret and truly embrace the chaos that had become his family? Jake leaned forward, fingers splayed against the desk as he stared at the flickering light. The conversation with Jonathan swirled in his mind, unsettling yet undeniably vital. It was a first step, however small, but it threatened to shatter the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. Each ring of the phone had once induced anxiety, but now he felt an evolving determination. The ranch stretched before him, vast and alive, almost echoing the potential for change he desperately sought. He shifted his focus toward the mountains in the distance, solid, unwavering. They seemed to silently challenge him. Could he too stand firm in the face of previous shortcomings? With an intent he hadn't previously felt, he picked up the phone once more. This time it wasn't about Jonathan. It was about Amelia. He scrolled through his contacts, hesitating at the sight of her name. Memories washed over him. Her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when discussing her art, how she could visualize the world in colors he had never perceived. It hadn't taken long for him to realize how he'd hurt her alongside his children through his neglect. Sitting back, he deliberated on how to approach Amelia. Reaching out to Jonathan had stirred something inside him. Connection. But with Amelia, the stakes felt higher. Their bond once bridged emotions raw and unfiltered, acting as a cathartic release in his otherwise hardened life. Would she recognize that he had changed? Drawing in a breath, he dialed. As it rang, he felt the weight of years of silence press against him. Would she spit fire, or would she softly expose the wounds he had inflicted? Jake, her voice was cool, reminding him of autumn leaves rustling in a hush. It's been a while, he said, emotions veering into uncharted territory. You think saying that makes it any easier? She hinted as if he was inserting a knife into the wound. No, but I'm here to tell you I've been doing some thinking, he replied. His words steadied him, sharpened by his earlier resolve to engage openly with wounds anew. What's to think about? You turned your back on everything that mattered, she shot back, the hurt still palpable, sharp-edged and aching. I know, he said, voice faltering momentarily. But that's part of why I'm calling. I want to acknowledge how my choices hurt you, hurt all of us. I can't change the past, but I want to communicate. I'm trying to do better now, and honestly, I could really use your guidance. Guidance? She scoffed, but her tone had shifted slightly, as though she were reconsidering. Yes, he pressed. I've reached out to Jonathan, and it felt like maybe confronting my own failures is necessary to reclaim the pieces I long disregarded. I want to do this right, even if that means starting from scratch. I miss your creativity. I think it could help me see this path forward. There was a stark silence on the other end. Jake braced for rejection, but instead felt the pulse of possibility. You want to build trust, then, Amelia offered, her voice gentling, weaving past the sharp edges. It won't be easy, but it's a start. Yes, Jake embraced the sentiment, relief saturating his nerve endings. I'm willing to listen and learn, regardless of whether we'll ever be what we were. I just want to acknowledge the mistakes and make amends where possible. The conversation tightened, the severity of the past meeting the gradual potential of hope. Something strange blossomed within him. He dared to believe he could indeed rebuild something meaningful, even if it took time. He grasped this fleeting moment, knowing every connection had the power to change him. As they discussed art and the effects of time on creativity, it became evident they could forge a new path. Perhaps not as lovers, but as collaborators driven by pain and healing. Hanging up, a surge of optimism uncoiled in his chest. It was happening. He could sense movement in the stillness of his life. Yet another name echoed at the fringes of his mind. Marissa. Tremors of uncertainty ran through him. How would she react to his new presence? Would she respond with openness, or would the chasm of their shared trauma swallow any chance of connection? Jake set the phone down, steeling himself for an even greater confrontation as the upcoming call loomed large. He could not avoid the truth any longer. The past beckoned him forward, demanding he face it head-on. One step at a time, he told himself, as he prepared to dial again. The real test was yet to come. Jake's heart raced, his palms slick against the phone. Contemplation gripped him. Marissa was a constant specter in his narrative of neglect and denial. As he stared out at the sprawling ranch, he understood the magnitude of what confronting her might mean. In many ways, she was the source of his deepest failures. His absences had carved wounds in her spirit too. Dialing her number felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. The potential for either liberation or disaster loomed above him. Each ring echoed in the silence of his office, layering his apprehension thicker with each chime. Jake? Marissa's voice carried a coolness that both comforted and stung. Hi, Marissa, he managed, fighting to suppress the tremor in his voice. I know it's been a while. That's an understatement, she replied sharply. The silence that followed curled around them, heavy with shared memories that lay unacknowledged like dust on old shelves. I've been doing some thinking, he ventured, wary of her guardedness, about everything. I don't think there's much to discuss, she retorted, her tone as resolute as granite. Jake swallowed hard, wrestling with feelings rising up like tide waters. Every word felt like a fragile bridge he needed to traverse, yet he knew the stakes. I messed up, Marissa. I hurt you. I didn't show up when it mattered. She was quiet, and he sensed her walls were still intact, impenetrable. But beneath her facade, he could hear strains of the pain he'd caused. And you think an apology is going to change anything? You abandoned us. I know I can't erase the past, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But I want you to understand that I'm trying. I'm reaching out to both you and Amelia for a reason. I'm ready to confront my failures, not just for the sake of my own well-being, but to do right by my kids and by you. Following in Amelia's footsteps now, are we? She snapped. That's not the point, he pleaded. This isn't about forming alliances. It's about recognizing my past and taking responsibility. I've spent too long shying away from the people I care about. I want to figure out what we can salvage, if anything. Salvage? You think we can just pick up the pieces like nothing happened to us? Her voice quivered with suppressed emotion, and for a moment, Jake had to gather his own resolve to remain present. Maybe not like nothing happened, he admitted, but maybe if we can talk, we can start to rebuild a framework. I need to approach my children with honesty, and that means addressing what's gone wrong with us. In that pause, he felt a shift. Perhaps for the first time since their fractured years began, they were both confronting the consequences of his absence. The pathway toward reconnection was laden with hurt, yet something tentative radiated between them. Do you know how many nights I spent wondering if you even thought about us? She asked, her words a mixture of vulnerability and anger. Yes, he replied, fully immersing himself in the honesty of this moment. And each realization cut deeper than I can express. I'm ready to acknowledge the hurt I've caused, but I need your participation. I can't do this alone. Silence enveloped them again, but this time it felt less suffocating. You really believe we can come back from this? She murmured, disbelief mingling with a flicker of hope. I don't know, he confessed, but I believe we owe it to ourselves to try. I'm committed to change. I can't carry the weight of my choices any longer. Fine, she said reluctantly, but it won't be easy. You'll have to do the work. Just saying it isn't enough. He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I'm ready for whatever it takes, Marissa? As they discussed the children and skirmished through raw emotions, Jake felt a sense of clarity emerging from the haze. One shaky step after another, he saw a path unfolding. Their words wove between painful memories and gentle hopes, inviting a future littered with challenges but buoyed by hard-earned trust. Hanging up, Jake felt lighter, yet anchored by new responsibility. Would he stumble as he embraced this fresh path, or rise like the mountains he admired? Uncertain, he turned toward the horizon, the sun dipping low in a finalized promise of another day. Amongst that fading light, another name lingered in his thoughts. The children. Their connection needed nurturing too, but he found himself plagued with questions. What if they weren't ready to forgive him? What if his attempts to reconnect just amplified their anger? Jake steeled his resolve as he glanced back at the phone. Another call awaited, and this one carried the thunder of thunderous anticipation. The time for questions and uncertain choices was over. It was finally time to face the children. Jake stood motionless for a moment, his heart beating in time with the fading sunlight. Each beat echoed the mental tug-of-war between excitement and dread. What was to come felt insurmountable yet necessary. He had spent years evading the reality of his choices. It was time to confront the aftermath, to face his children who had grown in the shadow of his absence. Before he could second-guess himself, he picked up the phone again. The contact for Amelia appeared on the screen, vibrant and alive. She had always been the icebreaker, the one least likely to veil her feelings behind guarded walls. Maybe that was the advantage he could cling to this time, the possibility of her openness. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the call button. Jake? Her voice was a solid anchor, yet somehow felt distant, as if she were standing on a different shore. Hey, Amelia, can we talk? Sure. What's going on? Her casual tone belied the hour of evening. She was used to him calling at odd times, but this felt different. I need to see you, he replied, a sense of urgency filling his voice. There are some things I need to say, and I think it's important we do it in person. What's this about? You're sounding serious? The tone of her voice shifted, the unmistakable glimmer of concern creeping in. I know I haven't been there for you or the family. I messed up, and I want to talk about it. Not just with you, but with all of you. I'm ready to face what I've done. His confession hung mid-air, laden with expectation. I don't know if we need to go digging in the past, Jake, she said, careful yet resolute. It's not just digging, it's about finding a way forward. I can't keep avoiding what needs fixing. The familiar weight of shame pressed against his chest, but he refused to let it choke him. I want to be real with you guys, really present for the first time. I'm scared, but I owe it to you and your siblings. A pause enveloped the line, the silence filled with all the unanswered questions and built-up frustration of years. Jake's grip on the phone tightened, anxiety mingling with hope. Okay, she finally said, her voice firm but softer. When do you want to meet? Tomorrow. I'll come to you. Maybe we can meet at that diner we used to go to? The one by the creek? The nostalgic suggestion slipped out, a silent prayer that it would evoke some warmth amid the rocky past. Got it. I'll let the others know. Just don't think you can show up and expect things to be fine. There was that unmistakable edge again, the reality creeping through. Jake nodded to himself, even though Amelia couldn't see. I wouldn't dream of it. I just want to talk. As he ended the call, a tumult of emotions battled within him. The very idea of seeing all four of them at once sent waves of unease crashing over him. Would they resent him for the gaping void he had left? The thought of their faces filled with disappointment haunted him. But an ember of determination flickered uniquely in his chest. This was a chance, possibly the last, to navigate the jagged terrain of their past misunderstandings and stride toward redemption. He envisioned not just a conversation, but the reconstruction of something utterly broken. The morning light broke through his mind's turmoil, and he envisioned every scenario. He needed to brace for anger, tears, and perhaps even reconciliation. However, a revealing thought rattled through him. What if these kids, not just Amelia but each of them, had pieces of their own narrative he had never glimpsed? What if, buried in their memories, lay truths that could transform their shared story into a bond stronger than blood? Jake leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to assemble a plan. Perhaps he could ask each one of them to describe how they felt about his absence. Each reflection could illuminate the shadows he had cast, showcasing the lessons he'd missed while hiding. The thought ignited a flicker of interest. Could his children offer him the chance to learn, not just about them, but also about himself? What skills had they developed in his absence that he had been blind to? He glanced outdoors, struck by the fading day. No turning back now. He had to prepare for confrontations that might not fit neatly into his expectations. What he faced was just a beginning, a raw awakening. As he carefully mapped his next steps, he couldn't help but feel that this journey might mirror a wild ride across the open plains. But little did he know, the real adventure was about to begin, and as soon as he opened that door, the path beneath his feet would shift in ways he couldn't yet fathom. Tomorrow loomed, promising chaos and discovery. It was time to confront the unexpected. As dawn broke, the sunlight streamed into Jake's kitchen, illuminating the scattered remnants of his past, empty coffee cups and neglected bills. Yet, the clutter was the least of his worries. Today, he'd face a reckoning that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He meticulously prepared, pouring his coffee stronger than usual and deliberately arranging a small notebook on the table. There, he wrote the names of each child, underlined with predefined questions he hoped would open dialogue. How did you cope? What did you think of me? These words were mere sketches of an emotional roadmap, but they encapsulated the self-reflection he sought to navigate the impending storm. Looking at the notes, a knot of apprehension twisted tighter in his stomach. Each name represented a life he had abandoned, a story he had chosen to dismiss until now. A sudden fatigue washed over him. How had he thought he could simply walk back into their lives and fix everything? Yet, a countercurrent surged beneath the surface of despair. Each child, an embodiment of his past mistakes and hopes, might provide insight into who he had become. There lay potential for understanding that could fracture the chain of guilt binding him. He pictured the diner, a humble establishment but familiar enough to serve as a backdrop for what lay ahead. What if each child wielded truths within them that could not just confront Jake, but reshape him? He began rehearsing his words, but with every passing moment, his resolve faltered. Would they embrace a man who had only shown them shadows? Or would they drown in the well of their hurt, refusing to engage with the specter of their father's absence? His phone buzzed, startling him from his thoughts. A text from Amelia appeared. "Are you ready for this?" The message throbbed in his mind like an accusation. "Ready?" he whispered to himself. Did readiness even exist when confronting one's shortcomings? Determined to be authentic during the meeting, he recalled the last time they shared laughter at that diner. He had been full of life then, oblivious to how his choices would strike like a lightning bolt through their family tree. He had turned a blind eye to his responsibilities, believing he could chase fortune while love waited patiently. That illusion shattered long ago. To prepare the truth he must confront today, Jake gathered a handful of old photographs, snapshots of moments he had forsaken. He studied the kids in those images. Their smiles spoke to a past rife with connection, but also a future fractured by neglect. How could he, someone so far removed from their realities, offer them anything meaningful today? In a rare moment of clarity, Jake recognized a hidden strength beneath his uncertainty, the ability to be vulnerable. If he could strip his pride and be genuine in front of them, perhaps there would be a flicker of hope. Time slipped away like grains of sand, and he was soon left with an hour before the meeting. As he glanced into the mirror, he searched for confidence in his own reflection. Beneath the wear of time, he peered into his eyes, willing to see a father, not a coward. With each passing moment, the tension thickened. He now understood that it wasn't just about facing his children. This journey required him to face himself. What did he stand to lose? As he stood ready to leave, his phone buzzed again. A message from his son Liam flashed on the screen. "Dad, you sure about this?" In that moment, a wave of realization washed over him. This wasn't just a meeting with his children. This was an entire generation ready to reveal truths about love, loss, and the promise of redemption. The stakes were high, yet for the first time in years, Jake felt the semblance of a battle within him transform into a resolve. But would his battle bring about the change he depended on? The looming question cast a weight over his heart as he stepped out and locked the door behind him. When he entered the diner, the scent of maple syrup danced around him, mingling with the sharp tang of expectation. He was not just entering a space, he was stepping into the battleground of their lives. Each face behind the screen would have their truths ready. Little did he know, one of them might unleash a revelation powerful enough to dismantle every defense he had built around himself. Jake took a deep breath, eyes scanning the room until they settled on a booth in the corner. It wasn't just time to speak, it was time to listen, to absorb the stories that could redefine them all. As he approached the table where Amelia waited with their siblings, the gravity of what was about to unfold buzzed in the air. Every step felt heavy yet light, imbued with possibility. Little did he know, the next few moments would not only challenge his past but carve out paths to futures he hadn't anticipated. Just as he thought he could grasp the direction, the unexpected soon flashed before him, waiting to shift the terrain entirely. Jake's heart thundered in his chest as he stepped closer to the booth, every beat echoing his mounting anxiety. The diner buzzed with a chaos that felt both foreign and hauntingly familiar. It was a strange juxtaposition, a sanctuary for some and a battleground for him. Amelia glanced up, her expression a mix of hope and guardedness. She hadn't changed much since the last time he'd seen her, yet the years and burdens they shared had morphed her into a fragile yet resilient version of herself. "Hey, Dad," she said, her tone carrying unspoken complexities. "Hi, Amelia," he managed, fighting against the lump forming in his throat. Sitting beside her, Jake noted how his children had grown. Taller, more assertive, yet he could sense the lingering echoes of pain beneath the surface. This was not just a reunion. It was a confrontation with the emotional aftermath he had left behind. "Where are the others?" he asked, attempting to keep the conversation grounded, aware of how much depended on the delicate pacing of their reunion. "Just getting drinks," she replied cryptically, her eyes shifting to the doorway as the sound of footsteps approached. One by one, the siblings trickled in, filling the booth with an array of expressions: curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed anger woven into the fabric of their faces. Each child carried their own account of abandonment, marked by the absence of a father. "Jake," Amelia began, her voice steady but laced with tension. "Before we really start, we need to know why you're here today. What do you expect from us?" A part of him recoiled at the directness of her question. It was an onslaught he hadn't prepared for. His voice faltered, the weight of his own intentions colliding with the harsh truth of their reality. "I want to understand. I want to know how I can be part of your lives again." "Is that even possible?" Liam's voice cut through the air, raw with emotion. "You think we just forgot about you? You think coming here changes anything?" His eyes blazed with vulnerability masked as anger, a fire that cut too close to Jake's heart. Jake felt the walls closing in, each word spoken like a brick sealing him off from erupting vulnerability. But then he remembered his intent, his commitment to tear down the defenses he had spent years building. "It's not about changing things," he said, summoning his courage. "It's about owning the past and hoping for a future together." The tension in the booth thickened, the air pregnant with unspoken words. It was Amelia who spoke next, her voice trembling yet resolute. "You missed so much, Dad. There were birthdays, graduations, and times we needed you. And you weren't there." He inhaled, letting the reality wash over him like a cold wave, stinging yet refreshing. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to listen, to learn from you, to understand who you are now, and how I fit into that world." As he spoke, he could see each emotion hanging in the air, the fragile strands weaving a deeper understanding of the pain he had caused. They weren't just children anymore. They were individuals, distinct architects of their narratives, each carrying pieces of their story that he had neglected. The first ventures into vulnerability felt perilous. Would they open up, or would they retreat further into their shields? Waiting in silence, Jake's thoughts swirled with questions about his capacity to truly connect. Would his sincerity translate into a bridge, or would his past continue to tower over them, an insurmountable obstacle? One of his daughters, a soft-spoken girl with similar eyes to his, finally broke the stillness with a question of her own. "What happened to you, Dad? Why did you choose money over us?" Each question was a dagger, aimed not to wound but to reveal the truth buried beneath layers of neglect. Jake met her gaze, and for the first time, he felt the stirring of a tempest within him, a force of confrontation and discovery that could rewrite their shared tale. He could no longer evade the truth. The time had come to face not just his children, but the legacy of choices that had shaped them all. "I let ambition cloud my judgment," he confessed, his voice trembling but unwavering. "I thought I could build a better life for us away from responsibilities. But I realize now that I was sorely mistaken. You were the life I should have fought for." The weight of his confession hung between them, and a flicker of something unnameable ignited in the air, a moment pregnant with possibility. Could this be the catalyst for change? A chance not just for reconciliation, but rediscovery? But just as he felt the tremors of hope shift within him, Amelia leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Then show us. Show us how you plan to change things. Show us you mean it." In that moment, Jake understood this was more than an emotional opening. It was a challenge that would require actions to accompany his words, a call to confront the roots of his past failures and the strength to create a new path forward. As he opened his mouth to respond, the clattering of dishes and the chatter of the diner receded into the background, fading like white noise. Jake could feel the weight of their collective gaze and the enormity of the journey before him. The ground was shifting beneath their feet, and the ground rules for the future were being rewritten in real time. He straightened in his seat, determination bubbling to the surface. But before he could speak again, the door swung open, and another presence entered the diner, a newcomer who would challenge everything they were about to attempt. A new wave of uncertainty crashed over him as he peered towards the door, bracing himself for what this unexpected arrival could mean for the fractured family looking to piece itself back together. Would they be ready for this new twist, or would it unravel the fragile connection they just started to forge? As Jake stood at the edge of the diner booth, uncertainty hung heavy in the air, palpable as each of his children absorbed not just his words, but the weight of the moment. The door swung open, causing every head to pivot and greet an unexpected figure. Linda, their mother, stood there, alive in a way he hadn't dared to hope for all these years. Time seemed to pause. Jake's heart stuttered as emotions collided, elation, fear, and disbelief. The air filled with a buzzing intensity, charged with the power of their shared history. This was a reunion he never anticipated, not after the letters that had peeled back layers of abandonment and grief. Linda's eyes widened as she took in the sight of Jake and their children. A brief flicker of recognition danced between them, marked by unresolved tension. Marissa, seat-bound, involuntarily bristled. "Mom?" she breathed, disbelief threading through her voice. Jake's own breath hitched. This was not merely a family reunion. This was a rediscovery of identities, and he needed to navigate the waters carefully. "Linda," he said finally, recalling echoes of their shared life, both sweet and bitter. "You're here." Her gaze traveled from him to the children, a tide of emotions crashing across her features. I heard about today. I didn't know if I could let this moment pass by," she stammered, fingers brushing against her own uncertainty. The tension radiating from the booth felt like a rubber band stretched to its limits. Each child's eyes flickered between their parents, the gravity of predictability and spontaneity intertwining. "What do we do now?" Jonathan whispered, a sense of cautious hope threading through the chaos. "Can we really unravel this mess?" Jake searched Linda's face for answers, grappling with the whirlwind of feelings swirling in a tempest of nostalgia and regret. "We face this together," he heard himself say while taking a deep breath, feeling the words reverberate through everyone present. "What do you want?" Linda's voice broke the silence, a question directed to Jake but echoed by the children who were silently demanding answers. "You left us, and I thought that was the end of our story. So tell me, what comes next?" Imbued with a surge of renewed courage, Jake prepared to set the stage for vulnerability. "I want to own my mistakes. I want to hear from each of you about how you've been affected by my absence and work toward restoring complexity in our relationships. This isn't going to be easy, but I am here, right now, willing to take these steps if you are." Tears glistened in Amelia's eyes as she absorbed these words, pivotal in marking a departure from chaos toward accountability. "And what if we're not ready?" she asked, voice trembling. "What if we can't forgive?" "That's okay," Jake replied. "I'm not here to demand forgiveness. I just want to strive for understanding. Understanding comes first." For the first time in what felt like eternity, he saw flickers of hope emerge in their faces. the dawn of empathy beginning to break through as they exchanged glances. This was more than just a reunion. It was an opportunity for transformation on both sides. As if his words ignited a spark, Marissa spoke up, sharing her own struggles. "You missed everything, Dad. I had to navigate loneliness and pain while feeling overshadowed by the absence of a father." Jake felt the sharpness of her words cut through him, raw and real. "I know, and hearing that is painful," he admitted, yet he felt compelled to offer his own truth. "Yet, I need you to know that I've been in prison for too long, caught in my own inner turmoil of wanting more, but failing to see the them that truly mattered. I never wanted to abandon you." No longer confined to a festering silence, Jonathan's voice rose, a blend of anger and hurt as he pushed against their father's narrative. "But here you are, trying to assume that you can just walk back into our lives and piece this back together. Do you even grasp the magnitude of what you've done?" "I understand that, John," Jake responded, intensity fueling his conviction. "It's a scarlet thread that we must unpack, but being here is my declaration to embrace the pain of our truth, to reconcile the present with what has been lost." Linda stepped forward, her own eyes shimmering. "I don't want to be lost in your journey, Jake. I need to be a part of this process too. If it is to mean something, let's confront it as a family." Jake's heart swelled at the prospect of unity where once lay division, a chance to reshape everything they had known into something unfamiliar, yet undeniably potent. "Yes, it's all of us or nothing," he said firmly, hoping they would lean into the reconnection they so desperately desired. As they dove deeper into conversations that required them to unearth emotional truths, a mutual understanding began to rise, a manifestation of patched scars transforming not into a burden, but a narrative alive with possibility. The layers peeled back, displaying fragile emotions buried underneath, layers alighting a flicker of hope that their will to connect would outweigh past failures. Perhaps amidst the chaos of their reunion lay the blueprint for resilience. Hours slipped by, infused with the gravity of wounds open and healing sought. Conversations became less confrontational. Instead, they blossomed into dialogues, building a bridge across their chasms of silence. The din of the diner faded into the background as Jake recognized that he was finally not just reconnecting with his past, but reclaiming his present. In those splendid moments of shared stories, textured with vulnerability, fear morphed into understanding. By the close of day, as they watched the sun begin to set, illuminating the potential for a new dawn, Jake understood. They did not need to chase their past. They could forge a new identity forward, breathing life into a future that was theirs to create. With every word spoken, the family emerged reshaped, redefined, not as fragments of who they once were, but as collaborators on the journey of healing. They carried their scars with pride now, each mark a memory of struggle, a testament to strength and survival. Jake leaned back in his seat, gazing at the faces around him. This was a moment of profound realization. Redemption was not found through silence, but through the jagged truths of love, rediscovered amidst a tapestry of complexity. A bond lost to time was reborn through shared understanding. With a weight now lifted off his shoulders, Jake transformed from a father marking his failures into an individual striving toward authenticity. This family had not just healed, they were united in a mission to uplift their interconnected narratives as they ventured into the future, together. As dusk bled into night, the diner buzzed with the ghost of laughter and understanding anew. Each child wore their resolved, perhaps forlorn expressions, but now they glimmered with the promise that the journey was far from over. It was just beginning. Now more than ever, it became critical for everyone around to celebrate not just personal growth, but echo the reverberation of reconnections. So as they savored moments anew, shared stories intertwined with laughter and tears, let's connect and resonate with every step forward. A life worth embracing. This is your chance. You need to subscribe now to witness the next monumental chapters in the journey of restoration. Leave a like now to help fuel this algorithm. Comment your thoughts and reactions about the transformations you've just witnessed. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who also need to see this heartwarming conclusion, because nothing feels better than uniting stories of overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this journey.